what's up? Sinisa, Super Bad Estrada here, and I just want to give a huge special shout out to the relay. Thank you so much for all of the continuous support, and thank you for all of the support during and after and before every single fight.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Bill Haney has now indicated that Devin Haney will likely move up and challenge Regis Prograis for his WBC Super Lightweight World title next. Not defend versus Shakur Stevenson, to the surprise of no one. He said they will next eye a unification versus WBO Super Lightweight World Champion Teofimo Lopez.
My thoughts.
I don't have a preference between those two fights, a Regis Prograis fight or a Teofimo Lopez fight, because for Devin, the threat level is about the same, and stylistically, it really is the same dichotomy. Boxer-puncher versus pure boxer, boxer-puncher with an affinity for counter-punching.
That's Lopez and Prograis.
It's what they are. Boxer-punchers with an affinity for counter-punching versus Devin, the pure boxer, the economic, more often than not economic, outside fighter, outside jabber.
Even if he occasionally elects to trade punches mid-range to inside, that's not his strong suit, that's not his forte, and that really isn't Devin at his best. At that range, more often than not, he looks vulnerable. He takes shots.
If he fights Regis Prograis, that's undoubtedly going to be a Matchroom show. A return to Matchroom for Devin Haney, who spent some time there.
Remember, for a long while, he was a Matchroom fighter. Now Regis Prograis, he's a Matchroom fighter. This would be the second fight of Regis' three-fight deal.
The first being the Danielito Zorrilla fight that he just had, the fight where he looked quite human. He may seem like low-hanging fruit to many, low-hanging fruit to Devin.
Which isn't saying much, because Teofimo Lopez seemed like low-hanging fruit after the Sandor Martin fight.
He seemed vulnerable. He seemed just as beatable as Regis Prograis may seem now. In one fight after that, the Josh Taylor fight, he turned it all around.
He did.
Changed everyone's perceptions.
Now he's back on top. He's WBO champion.
The beauty of boxing, that you're always one fight away from what could be your worst performance or your best.
Devin got to do to win this fight.
Devin's been long overdue to move up in weight, you understand. There's a legitimate argument that perhaps young Devin should have moved up 1 or 2 fights ago, because boiling down to 135, given his frame and his age, it must be difficult. At 140, he may feel stronger. He may feel more energized, and he might be, but he's never going to be a knockout merchant.
He's never going to be that kind of puncher, you know?
Even if he does get a slight power boost from not having to boil down to 135, instead campaigning at 140, I think the edge in power, it's got to go to Regis Prograis.
Devin wasn't all that big a puncher at 135. I don't think he's going to be that much more of a puncher at 140. Regis gets the edge in power. What's Devin got to do to work around it?
Use his height, use his length, and his speed. Be quicker to the draw than Regis Prograis, while judicious at the same time. Don't
throw combinations. Don't throw more than 1 or 2 punches at a time. Don't give him enough to time you.
Don't trade punches with him. Don't get into a shootout mid-range to inside. Devin ain't got big enough guns for that gun show. His best bet is to box from the outside, behind his jab, 1 and 2 punches at a time,
keeping distance,
moving east or west, or taking a half step back to set up a counter. If Regis is advancing,
Devin's got to create space.
That's what Devin's got to do. What Regis Prograis got to do is up the tempo, up the pace. Even though Regis Prograis is not a characteristic pressure fighter, he has to figure out a way to apply pressure on Devin, open him up.
Pure boxer's kryptonite is volume. The pure boxer's kryptonite is activity. Thus, Regis has to be more active.
More than usual. Regis Prograis, he really is more of a counter-puncher.
Devin Haney's not going to give you much to counter, so you can't really rely on that.
Waiting for him to make a mistake, and he might, but waiting for him to make a mistake to land a big punch, land a big shot. With Devin, you've got to open him up, you've got to apply pressure. The Danielito Zorrilla fight that Regis Prograis just had, that could be a wake-up call for him.
Yeah.
What to work on.
Regis is a gifted puncher. His offensive arsenal, his combinations, they're fluid, but perhaps where he's lacking is downstairs, his footwork, his feet.
When giving chase, when he has to catch up to a moving target, if the Danielito Zorrilla fight exposed anything, it's that Regis does struggle cutting off the ring against a moving target. A target that is moving away, a target, an opponent that is not engaging.
Devin may not engage. He might pot shot you from the outside. You got to be ready for that.
Cutting off the ring and focusing on that. There has to be be an emphasis on closing off the exits for a moving target ahead of a Devin Haney fight, because he may be on the move.
Now, Devin doesn't spend as much time on his bicycle as, say, Sandor Martin or Danielito Zorrilla, who Regis fought in his last fight. He doesn't normally do that, but based on how Regis looked in his last fight, he might.
This time he might, because he can identify that as an area where Regis is lacking. So I reiterate, what Regis has got to do to win this thing is up the tempo, up the pace, so he can open up Devin and land hard punches. The pure boxer's kryptonite really is volume.
It is.
Activity.
Doubling and tripling up on the jab.
Keeping that pure boxer behind his guard and not throwing punches, not throwing counters.
So even if you can't find a way around his guard or through it, you're still outworking him. You still appear busier in the round to the judges.
And as stated, I don't have a preference. I could go for a Prograis fight as much as I could go for a Lopez fight. Stylistically, it's a very similar situation.
So I have no doubts that the Lopez contingent and his faction of fans will use this as ammunition to say that Devin swerved Teofimo Lopez.
Even if Bill Haney, Devin Haney's father, says that Lopez is part of the plans. If they beat Regis, they want to unify with Lopez.
If Devin were to beat Regis and become a two-division champion, that would put both him and Teofimo on equal footing.
They would both be champions. They would both be super lightweight champions. They would both be two-division champions on equal ground.
Even.
Though we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. First, Devin's got to make it past Regis, and it's really not a foregone conclusion that he does.
See what happens.
Men's super bantamweight news ahead of this week's big super bantamweight title fight. Fulton on newfound Road Warrior roll. I don't feel different. I feel completely normal.
And perhaps he does, but for his team, traveling abroad in defense of their two alphabet titles may be a novel sensation, giving rise to all these cold feet.
Stephen Fulton has fully embraced his newfound Road Warrior role. The unified WBC WBO Super Bantamweight champion from Philadelphia, PA, has felt at home the moment he arrived in Japan on July 11th. He will have been in the country for a full 2 weeks by the time the opening bell sounds for his blockbuster showdown versus former 3-division champion Naoya Inoue on July 25th at the Akiari Arena in Tokyo.
The controversy about the hand wraps is what's really dominating the conversation in reference to this fight.
I don't feel different. I feel normal, Fulton said when meeting with the Japanese press during a recent media day. I feel completely normal. It's not my first time out of the country. I've competed outside the U.S. in the amateurs, and as a semi-pro, it's just my first time as a professional.
As a professional, Inoue has fought 4 times outside of Japan, 4 times on foreign soil, whereas Stephen, this is the first time.
The visiting American is as unbothered about the odds as he is about fighting in front of what will be a partisan but always respectable crowd to support Inoue. I'm not shy. I'm not nervous, insisted Fulton. I really feel normal. I like to embrace it. I like to embrace the people where I'm at so I don't feel nervous, and a part of me believes him.
Part of me is compartmentalizing this controversy because it might be Stephen Fulton's trainer that's got the cold feet more than Stephen himself. Stephen helped to make this fight happen. He didn't have to.
And I didn't forget that. He had the option of leaving this division, moving up in weight, and taking on Brandon Figueroa, who he already beat for a second time.
He could have fought him again.
Granted that the money for that fight wouldn't have been anywhere near the money for this fight, though all the same, Stephen did help to make this fight happen, so a part of me feels that the apprehensiveness we're seeing has more to do with Stephen's trainer than Stephen himself.
Stephen Fulton, who says they don't believe in me, so let's make them believers.
Would like to think that Stephen Fulton himself is not responsible for what this fight has devolved into.
Conversation.
When you're the underdog, you're like overlooked, Fulton told Top Rank Boxing. I've seen and I've heard a lot of things that people are saying about the power, and he may not have a chin. Inoue is this and he's that, and I like that. Heading to Japan could place Fulton in a hirsute situation, but the unified star couldn't think of a better way to prove that he's a better fighter. For now, Fulton will keep his lips zipped as Inoue supporters continue to doubt him. Once the dust is settled after July 25th, Fulton firmly believes that he'll have an even bigger fan base. They don't believe in me. Let's make them believers.
It's about you start with Wahid Rahim.
Start with him, since he seems to be under the impression that simple gauze and tape is tantamount to an Acme anvil in the gloves. We're not talking about plaster of Paris here, a substance that, when it combines with sweat, forms a cast around the fighter's hand.
This is not that.
If you are of the opinion that the manner in which Naoya Inoue wraps his hands gives him a power advantage, then wrap Stephen Fulton's hands the same way that Inoue's hands are wrapped, and he'll have the same advantage he has, at which point they'll both be on even terrain.
Problem solved.
But that is far too logical a solution for the illogical mongoloids who have already taken to calling Naoya Inoue a cheater, even though he's not guilty of cheating.
Literally, he's not breaking any rules.
Just wrap his hands the same way Naoya Inoue's hands are wrapped. And because Stephen Fulton is, in fact, the naturally bigger fighter, then he should become, at least in theory, the naturally bigger puncher.
For anybody that thinks the source of Naoya Inoue's power is the manner in which his hands are wrapped, you do realize that Stephen can wrap his hands the same way Inoue does.
Nobody's stopping him. It's perfectly legal in Japan.
So have at him, cowboy.
Stephen Fulton, who says, "What is intimidating? Since I've been out here, this week alone, 3 people that I've known have died in Philadelphia."
No, I don't doubt that they have. Philadelphia is a cesspool, let's be honest.
The disconnect is that it's the only cesspool, that America is the only place in the world where people get shot, that America is the only place where ghettos exist. There are worse ghettos in other countries than this one.
Well, don't tell the people here stateside that. For some, it seems to be a point of pride how fucking awful their neighborhood is.
They don't call boxing a poor man's sport for nothing. There are poor men all around the world, and coincidentally, there are boxers from all around the world. In any event,
I really would like to think that this fiasco has more to do with Stephen's trainer and his jitters than Stephen himself.
really would like to think that Stephen, the fighter, he's going to back himself. He's going to like his chances against anyone. He is an unbeaten fighter. He does not yet know how to lose. His trainer, however,
Outside looking in, he sees something in Naoya Inoue and he doesn't like it. He's afraid.
anyone latching on to the idea that gauze and tape is tantamount to an Acme anvil, a shake weight, or a shoehorn, they're afraid too. They're just using this as a crutch, when in reality, if wraps are giving Inoue an advantage,
Just wrap Stephen's hands the same way and he'll have the same advantage. And he's bigger.
I never saw a more petrified, pussified generation of boxing fans, quote-unquote boxing fans, that have to do this much complaining.
The content creators that pander to them.
Tantamount to monetized victimhood.
Perfect example is a mongoloid on Twitter that goes by the name Curtis Skoon.
Who stated, "I really hope Fulton doesn't turn into Boom Boom Mancini and turn Inoue into Dooku Kim. I'm praying for Inoue. How can he compete without pads and a cast in his gloves? This isn't fair."
Relegating this situation to the Antonio Margarito plaster of Paris situation years ago with Shane Mosley.
Bear in mind that Naoya Inoue has never failed a VADA test, never tested positive for a banned substance. Unless I'm mistaken, there is VADA testing in association with this fight.
But he's calling him a drug cheat.
What you're looking at here in Curtis Spoon
Skoon.
is a fully grown adult with a not fully grown mind.
He's a petulant child.
One of many we see in the YTBC that wrestles with both a superiority complex and an inferiority complex, if you can believe that, which creates the imbalance, the presence of the two, because you have to be imbalanced.
Characterizes the morbid ramblings of a diseased mind.
He actually had the audacity to question whether or not Nonito Donaire is a Hall of Fame fighter. He said, "Is Donaire a Hall of Fame fighter? Donaire is trained by his wife and was damn near 40 when Inoue the cheater beat him. He's afraid of drug testing for a reason. He stacks his hand wraps for a reason. Y'all won't be happy until he kills someone in the ring. He's a quote-unquote monster, all right."
You're a quote-unquote idiot.
Fucking moron. Anyone with so much as one iota of a brain cell knows that Nonito Donaire is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is definitely getting in the Hall.
That's the first thing.
The second thing is, if you're so concerned with Inoue wrapping his hands, stacking his wraps, as he so eloquently put it, you know that Stephen Fulton can do the same thing.
Then they'll both be monsters.
Or is it that underneath it all, you know Stephen Fulton can wrap his hands the same way that Inoue does, but it may not give him a power advantage? That everything you're saying
Because you're afraid.
you're scared that Stephen Fulton can't deliver, that Stephen Fulton may not be able to beat this guy. So what you do preemptively is you slander him. You call him a ped cheat. You accuse him of using plaster of Paris.
When there is no plaster of Paris, there are no illegal hand wraps.
Stacking, as it's called, is perfectly legal in Japan, and that's where the fight is taking place. Stephen Fulton was fully aware of that when he signed the contract. He knew what he signed up for. You're just gravitating towards this because if he loses, it hurts your fragile little fucking ego.
That's the inferiority complex.
You see, the superiority complex is thinking that because you might have something in common with Stephen Fulton, that makes him unique. That makes him special.
In reality, it's not even about Stephen. It's about you.
Let's get it straight that this isn't necessarily about Stephen Fulton so much as the diseased minds that live vicariously through him, like Curtis Schoon.
You've probably got one thing in common with this guy, just one thing, because you ain't no boxer, you ain't no world champion, you're not fighting anybody on Tuesday, he is.
When he eats, you don't shit.
You're nothing.
Nobody. A fucking nobody. But you do live vicariously through Stephen, and because of that
tenuous association,
you're willing to tear down anybody, slander anybody in his name, which is really just your own.
like I said, it's not really about Stephen. This guy's just projecting.
Maybe Stephen gets the job done in Japan. Maybe he doesn't. But if he doesn't, this guy's already got his excuses lined up. That he knew he is a ped cheat, that he's using plaster of Paris.
If he's a ped cheat, what peds did he get busted for using?
What banned substances did they find in his system, since you're accusing him of being a ped cheat? If his hand wraps are illegal, then why is the Japanese Boxing Commission allowing him to fight? Why have they allowed him to fight with those same hand wraps in the past if it's illegal, according to you, if he's cheating?
And why is stacking your wraps also legal in some states right here in the US of A, like Las Vegas, Nevada? You do realize that both Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin,
They stacked their wraps when they fought each other.
a childlike mind like this one cannot be bothered to do the research. And even if the research itself is iterated to a diseased mind like this one, it goes right over his head.
And if you sat there and you held this moron's hand and walked him through all of this, it would fall on deaf ears because he's made up his mind. His little pea brain. He knew he has to be a cheater.
No, he has to be, because he couldn't possibly beat Stephen Fulton any other way. It's not possible that a foreign fighter like Inoue might be better than an American fighter.
It's not possible. He's got to be cheating, so that if Inoue proves Curtis Schoon wrong, he's already got his ducks in order. He's already got his excuses lined up, so he doesn't have to deal with the reality of things.
He's not the only one.
The filth of the YTBC is already hard at work propagating these narratives.
Telling you, it comes from both a superiority complex and an inferiority complex. In their own mind, they're superior just because.
Where it becomes an inferiority complex is where they have to propagate all these narratives to not deal with the reality of things. Keep up this front.
Copium.
All the properties of an addictive substance like opium with the need to cope. Coping with being completely off base.
And there's your copium.
Having to cope with being wrong and having to cope with the grim reality that the universe and everything in it doesn't revolve around you.
Because like I said, this is not about Stephen. This is about the mongoloids that live vicariously through him.
Take this stuff way too far.